Welcome to Creator Conversations, a monthly series where we sit down with top LinkedIn creators to talk about their challenges, triumphs, dreams, successes, and more. See what inspires them to create content and engage with communities around the world.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Creator Conversations, live from the Empire State Building in LinkedIn, New York office. I'm your host, Scott Rising, and I am very excited about our topic today, nepotism in the workplace. We've all heard stories of favoritism based on family ties, but what does this really mean for businesses, employees, and the future of work? Throughout today's show, we'll be exploring the various facets of nepotism, from its impact on employee morale and productivity to the ethical dilemmas it presents. We'll also dive into potential strategies for addressing this age-old practice and discuss how organizations can work towards creating a more equitable and inclusive environment for all. We'll also challenge our viewers to consider the ways in which they may have benefited from nepotism at one point or another. As always, we want to hear from you, our audience. Share your thoughts, experiences, and questions about nepotism in the comments, and let us know where you're joining us from. And now, allow me to introduce our amazing guests. First, we have CEO of Aerodai and author of the upcoming book, The Inclusive Organization, Netta Jenkins.
Hi, so nice to be here.
So great to have you.
Thank you.
And then we have workplace mental health speaker, LinkedIn learning instructor, and author of Trust Yourself, Melody Wilding.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
So great. Now, first, just to get us started, maybe Netta, how would you describe nepotism, just in its most basic form?
You know what? I cannot describe it without providing an example.
Perfect. We love examples.
Right. And so I think about the workplace. I work with so many leaders within the workplace that are on an executive level. And typically what I find, especially around the internship program, is when they want to bring in their children or a nephew or niece that can then get that internship or work for the organization. And, I typically say, well, you're already in a privileged position. The person that you're also referring may not even want to work here, right? And you're not really providing an opportunity for other people to also be able to work within the organization. So nepotism, I see, is really about bringing in family members, friends, an individual that is at a privileged level already, and saying, hey, I'm not going to give anyone else an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to add to that, Melody?
Yeah, I would say at the most basic level, nepotism is about favoring some people because of your close relationship with them, whether they are family members, you went to the same university, you play at the same country club. And I think the easiest way to think about it, Netta, building on your example, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the show Succession, where you have the Roy children who are benefiting from their father's influence to get into politics, to have leadership positions at the company. But for the most part, they're anything but qualified to actually do that.
Yeah, they don't seem to do much work, and yet they're like in line to be running an entire global organization.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's pretty obvious maybe to people at home how this could have really negative impacts for people for individuals. But Netta, what impact does this have on organizations?
Yeah, within organizations, what it does is it builds tension. Employees within an organization start not trusting the process. They say, well, I don't have an opportunity. I can't refer anyone in that role, right, or that position. And so the productivity level then decreases as well. And then also people are not as empowered to really do the work. They're not empowered to also build that relationship with leaders within the organization. And I think at a whole, it's just a distrusting process, right? It really hinders one's growth as well.
That's a really interesting word to hone in is trust, because if you can't trust your leaders to hire the right people to do the job, how can you trust them to make other decisions at the organization?
Exactly. Yeah, and I would say in my experience, what I've seen is not only imposter syndrome, because you feel as an individual, you are on the outside. You are not in the in-group. You may be different from everybody else there. And to Netta's point, learned helplessness, where people feel like, why should I bother to speak up if it's not going to be listened to anyway, or somebody else's opinion carries so much weight over mine?
Yeah, that's the idea that someone may not feel comfortable speaking their mind because if there's someone who's being favored by their boss, like, why should I even bother? That's really interesting. What would you say to someone in that situation? I know you talk to sensitive strivers all the time and people with imposter syndrome.
That's right. That's right. I think first and foremost is to find other allies in the organization. You need to find people who can be your champion, your sponsor, who can lift you up and make connections to counterbalance that bias that is happening. And I think also what goes hand in hand with that is building your own visibility, being able to talk about not just your work, how you're doing it, the process you're taking, the rationale, but also to be talking about your accomplishments. So people see that you actually get results.
Yeah, you want to draw that contrast between yourself and whoever is benefiting from the nepotism. And Netta, from an organizational standpoint, it can probably feel, even for middle management and anyone who's not the CEO, if it's happening at a high enough level, well, what can I do? It's the boss. Like, we would just have to listen to what they say. So what would you say to leaders, even at organizations, about trying to help be a part of structures that insulate from nepotism?
Yeah. So typically what I tell leaders is, first I start off with inclusion. I define what inclusion is to them. Inclusion is identifying the privilege and power you hold, and then also saying to yourself, well, how do I share this privilege and power with others? And I think if more leaders stop and pause and say, okay, I'm in this executive level role or senior level role, I have this position, and I can easily, yes, bring my daughter or son or whoever on board, but I also can provide an opportunity to someone that may not ever be able to get into this role. That's when you're actually sharing your power and your privilege with others. And so I typically like to share that advice with leaders and with organizations.
Yeah, and I'd also love to hear from the audience or anyone at home if you've benefited from nepotism. I would love to hear it in the chat, or if you've seen nepotism at work. From an individual level, people, what are some examples of maybe nepotism that people would not necessarily think of as nepotism that actually kind of are?
Yeah, I can start.
Go for it.
One I've seen among many of my clients that I've also experienced myself is when you might be in a very niche industry where people who are above you are bringing in folks that they have worked with from various companies that they were alumni with at their school, that is someone's son or daughter, and they may create a position for that person that you didn't even know existed. And I've seen that happen time and time again, and it's very frustrating when you're trying to push for your own advancement and someone just comes in and cuts the line.
Yeah, it's interesting. The school ties one is very interesting, these sort of insular clubs. And I worked at a company that actually, because they recruited from certain campuses, they would encourage, oh, you all went to the same school, like let's do like little get-togethers. And it's interesting how these little things like that potentially can perpetuate maybe the proverbial boys club or college club or different privilege. How prevalent would you say nepotism is?
Yeah, nepotism is very prevalent. I think across almost every single organization, you typically hear, and especially when I speak with leaders, I typically hear them say, well, yeah, I'm going to bring on my family member, right? I'm going to bring on my family member.
And how do you react? You have to just go,
yeah, and I'm just like, but why, right? You have an opportunity and a space to actually bring someone else on board that can truly grow and flourish, right? And I think the other thing about it is oftentimes I find that their sons and daughters that are brought in, they don't really want to be there, right? Or they don't really have the background or the knowledge or the experience, right? So you're setting them up for failure as well when they can flourish somewhere else that they really want to be. So I think there's that other pressure on the other end of thinking about, well, does my relative even want this? Or is it just simply because I'm in a privileged position and I can easily give that person the funding and the experience.
Yeah. Yeah, before we came here, I took a informal poll on my LinkedIn.
Not scientific.
Not scientific, but 87% of people said that they had experienced nepotism in their careers, which was a really striking number to me. I thought it was going to be around 50 or 60, but it was 87. And I think what's very challenging is there's a very fine line to networking, and we're always encouraged to build relationships with people, right? Your network is your net worth. But where does that cross the line into nepotism, where it's unfair and it's biased? And I think what Netta was saying is this idea of when you are favoring people who are clearly not qualified or not the best candidate for that role or that opportunity, that's where it starts to cross the line.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into a little game we're going to play. And it's called Nepotism or Nepotisn't. In this interactive segment, Melody and Netta will put their nepotism detecting skills to the test as they're presented with a series of workplace scenarios. Their mission? To determine just how nepotistic each situation is. We've even created a special scale for the occasion called the Nepo Baby Scale. Our guests will rate each scenario on a scale from 1 to 5 Nepo babies, where 1 Nepo baby is maybe a barely there hint of nepotism, and 5 Nepo babies is the children on HBO's Succession. Feel free to play at home by putting your own number, your own assessment in the chat. So let's dive in and see if our guests can suss out what nepotism and what just nepotisn't. So you'll raise your hand to signify the number. Our scenario 1, a manager hires their cousin for an entry-level position, but the cousin is well qualified and goes through the standard hiring process like every other candidate. 5? We're going 5?
No, I should only one hand, right?
Yeah. We're going right out the gate.
I don't know.
I'm saying 3.
Okay, let's hear Melody.
I'm saying 3 because there may have been selection bias in picking out that person and not looking at a broader pool. But the fact that the person went through objective hiring criteria, it takes it down from a 5.
Yeah, I would give it a 4.
Okay.
Still, that person has someone that's bringing them in, so they already have that connection. And they are able to then progress within kind of their path there. So I would give it a 4.
All right. Our next scenario, a supervisor consistently assigns the most desirable projects and tasks to their spouse, who also works at the company, without considering the skills and abilities of other team members. I think something to consider here is, I guess they already work together, so it's the hiring is out of the equation. But let's see what you all think about this scale. We're giving this 5. I think there's going to be a lot of 5s coming up. I will check in on our people watching at home, but let's go on to scenario 3. Scenario 3 is a company leader invites their adult children who do not work at the company to various company retreats or events.
I'm going to say 4.
I would say 4.
4. Okay, and explain that.
Yeah, I think it's okay if a leader wants to invite their children, as long as they're also giving other folks within the organization that opportunity as well to bring their children. But I would say it's a 4.
I agree. I agree, and especially because I know we only have limited time, but it wasn't clarified if they were actually participating or they're just there to hang out.
The devil's in the details,
That's
absolutely. Because, maybe these people are just coming for the free hors d'oeuvres and past apps and all that, and they have no desire to even partake in any of the company's activities. We're getting, this last one, we're getting a lot of 2s, 3s, 4s. A lot of people with the spousal agreement were saying 5. We even got a 6, which is not part of the scale. I will remind you all.
Pretty high.
And as a reminder, 5 Nepo babies is the most extreme example, and 1 is just barely there. Scenario 4, a company's board of directors is primarily composed of close friends and family members of the CEO without any apparent regard for their qualifications or experience in the industry.
It's a 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Netta, given you're writing a literal book on inclusive organizations, what can you tell me about that scenario or what you've heard and learned?
Yeah, they're not giving anyone else an opportunity to come in, right? It's just their family and their friends, and it will always be their family and friends. Yeah. And again, that's a miss on their part. It's going to be very hard for them to really grow their organization with the same type of mindset, the same type of demographic and population of people.
Yeah, it's extremely detrimental to the organization.
Yeah.
That's probably the most clear-cut example. And if you're almost giving people a paycheck, you're just like keeping them on payroll
right.
to sign off on your whatever you want to do.
Right, exactly.
Scenario 5, a recent graduate gets a job at a prestigious company in the same field as their mother. While their mother does not directly intervene on their behalf, people recognize the name, and it does unlock some doors.
I would say a 3.
We have 3 and 4. Melody, since you gave the harder example, what would you say?
This is a complicated one because it sounds like it was not on the new grads. It was not their fault necessarily that this happened, but there are subconscious biases that someone hears that name and all of a sudden that carries, it's called the halo effect in psychology, where one person's perception sort of spreads to other people. And so I think inadvertently the person is benefiting from that, even though it's not necessarily their fault.
Yeah, there's the power dynamic there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of 3s on this one, a couple 2s, and it is complicated. And again, it's going to really vary on the specifics, but it's interesting how to the point of the halo effect. If your last name is Cronkite or something, and then they don't even know if you're related, but they just hear the name, like they're just like, oh, I've already have these associations with this name as it comes to journalism.
Yeah.
So it's super interesting. Our next is a teenager works a summer internship at their parents' firm.
This is a hard one. I would give it a 4.
A 4? Okay, so Melody was 5, Netta 4.
Yeah.
What would you think?
This one is a hard one. You know, it's your parents' organization, little family business. And so they may not, and again, I'm just speculating here, but let's say they don't quite have the funding. And maybe they're bringing their child in to work for free.
Yeah.
I have my son doing my videos for me. For free.
Oh, that video production experience you're giving.
For free, right? So, of course, we need a little bit more context here. But I think if it's that type of situation, then it's not too bad because it's really dependent on funding and what that person can afford as well. So.
I think a lot of people probably do say, like, we weren't going to have an internship program. I just invented this thing, and it's, so I don't know if that makes it better or worse. But the next scenario is very, very much related because I do think that the specifics of it. This scenario: a teenager works evenings at their parents' restaurants, and they only make tips. So how would we rate that on a nepotism? They were directly hired by their parents.
And they only make tips.
They only earn tips. They're not even getting paid.
I would say that's a 1.
And a 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how that shifts our perception of those specifics really shift the perception of the individual. Because and also, how do you think about maybe something super nepotistic, that's a weird adjective, in that moment, but then in the grand scheme of things, like for your whole career,
right?
How would you think about those moments where maybe your first job was due to nepotism and then nothing after that had anything to do with it?
Yeah. Well, I think about, so my mom has a nonprofit organization, and so she has me as her board member, right? And she has me doing a whole other host of things, her COO and everything else. But she doesn't have the funding. right? Her nonprofit does not have the funding to then say, yeah, I'm going to hire an individual, bring them in. So she has her daughter that is doing these things. So I think, this is what makes nepotism kind of tough. It really is dependent on, hey, what is that particular experience? What's happening, even from a funding perspective for that individual, and why are they making that decision, as opposed to, well, I'm just going to bring my family member on because I can bring my family member on. Right?
Yeah.
So,
And it's interesting because now that we're talking about this, I also started my career working with my parents, and that taught me such valuable skills about organization and client service and what have you. But it's not, it hasn't become a pattern in my career. So I think it's also where nepotism crosses the line is when the individual is using it in almost a malicious way. And when the organization, like in Netta, in your example, and certainly in my parents' example, they didn't have the resources to bring on other people. So I feel like it becomes more nepotism when it's depriving other people of an opportunity.
Yeah, and I had to think, I didn't think I benefited from nepotism, and I thought back on similarly, like a high school job at my parents' company or organization, and it's like, oh, wait a second, I just kind of, that was basically just handed to me, and while I didn't end up going in that field, like those experiences were super valuable for me later, or maybe it was helpful for my resume. When do you think nepotism can be beneficial, I guess, as a follow-up to what we were just saying?
I think the example we just talked about is one of those when the organization may not have resources. And I think also you may come from a family or a community where you have incredibly talented people. I think about my grandfather was in Mensa, which is an organization for people with really high IQ. And if you're recruiting people out of Mensa, I think you're going to get very qualified people. So I think having it as your pool where there are qualified candidates, but making sure on the other side there are checks and balances so that it is as fair. The hiring process can be as fair as it can be.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Making sure that it's a fair hiring process, that people still go through the process and it's not just them getting in. I think that's when people start to question. People aren't, I did like a little informal poll myself, and, people typically are not mad if someone is brought into an organization and it's a family relative. What they get mad about is if that person bypassed the process. That's when people say, well, like, this is unfair, right? There's a power dynamic here that exists. And I think if a leader can be honest and say, hey, I'm putting this individual, I'm putting my family member in the process, but they're going through a rigorous process, right? And also highlighting those that didn't make it to the end. I think that's okay too. I think leaders just have to be a bit more transparent about the process that the individual is going through.
Yeah, it can almost be insulting to your intelligence if someone gets, if someone gets hired without going through that process. And
Exactly.
In terms of fairness and having an organization that lives by its values, it's so important. And if you have been if you've been the benefit of nepotism, or you feel, and maybe people can relate to this at home too, or if you feel that people perceive you as being the benefit because you're related to someone, even though it had nothing to do with anything, what do you say to those people who are like, okay, everyone thinks I benefited, or maybe I even did. What now? What do I do?
I say share that privilege and power with others.
Yes.
Right? Let's say you did benefit. Maybe you were interning at a big bank and now you're there full time and you're climbing the ladder. That's okay, right? You got to that level, great. But now how are you giving back to others that may not be able to have that same experience as you based on the connection that you have? And I think it's really thinking about who are you mentoring, who are you sponsoring, how are you providing those opportunities to those folks, and what's the impact of your efforts? Share that with others, right? Share that with those that bring people all the time, family members into the organization. Share the output of you mentoring and sponsoring someone that you brought in, and how that's really transformed the organization as well.
Absolutely. Mentoring, but also on a more granular level, amplification of underrepresented voices, or being that person who is, because you have a platform and privilege, lifting other people up. And to the point about transparency, fighting for that transparency, for what are our promotion criteria? How do we go about this process? You can be an agent for that change because of the power you have.
That's right. I think that's a really good point about the more transparent a process is, the more people can trust the outcomes of that process. Have you either of you have a story you want to share of experiencing nepotism? Maybe that was you felt like.
I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever really experienced nepotism. And again, I think for a lot of folks from marginalized groups, you tend to not be able to experience that. You know, both of my parents are immigrant parents to
Well, I
this
mean,
country.
witnessed.
I'm sorry, a witness.
Witnessed.
Oh,
too.
witness.
Yes.
So, okay,
yeah.
that's
And like, oh, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Yeah.
Witnessed. Oh, absolutely. I witnessed nepotism all the time within the workplace, and working with so many different organizations. You know, just hearing leaders say, hey, well, how about we just make this internship program all about family and friends? And I'm like, well,
It's like literally calling, we're doing a nepotism internship this summer.
I'm like, oh, okay, that's the definition of a nepotism, right? And not really allowing other people to come on in and have that experience as well. So that's the unfortunate part, but I witness it all the time.
Yeah, I've worked with people on both sides of it. So I've had clients who have been affected by nepotism, whether it's a situation like I was mentioning before, someone who they worked with at past jobs or, you know, played golf with is brought in to a new position above them. Or I've had clients who work in family businesses and they feel like their opinion is not valued as much. And I've seen it on the other side where I work with leaders of family businesses. I work with hiring managers and leaders, and thankfully, I work with very compassionate, empathetic people, and they're very cognizant of the perception that bringing someone they know, bringing that person in, what that may create and the impact, the trickle down that may have. And I think it's excellent, and having these types of conversations, I think, plants that seed for people of, you know, we have these unconscious cognitive biases, but when we bring them to our awareness, it's much easier to catch ourselves doing that.
Yeah. And I always say to leaders, you know, ask yourself why. Why am I doing this? What's the urge? Where is the urge coming from? And typically it's them knowing that individual.
Yep.
I trust them.
Yep.
I know them. I know that they're going to come in. I know that they will deliver. And so I'm going to bring them in. I think that's where nepotism stems from. And it's us kind of stepping away from that and saying, okay, but I can trust someone else too. I just have to develop that.
That's the really insidious part on
Yeah.
the nepotism, where you know the person actually is qualified and they're great at their job, and you're like, oh, they're going to be great. Like this is such an obvious decision. Like duh. But then that's where the sort of the things, the gaps in their own understanding and knowledge and the potential of what this could be, and often bringing in people that are just like them.
Yeah. Well, there's a confirmation bias at play where, because we have this natural likability for someone we already know, we attune to all of the things they do well, and we disregard the things that they're not so good at, right?
Exactly.
So that definitely comes up.
Well, before we go, it's been so much fun. I could talk about this for hours. We haven't even talked about the celebrity landscape of Nepo babies. So I will just give you one last chance. Any final words? Where can people find you? And we'll start with Melody.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be back on the show and to be in person. It's wonderful. And I would just say that if you are on either side of this coin, you can make a change from wherever you are. And so if you want to find me, I'm here on LinkedIn. Connect with me there. You can also get a free chapter from my book, Trust Yourself, at melodywilding.com/book.
Amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This has been amazing and such an important topic for us to talk about because it's happening in our organization, right? So it's good that we're having this conversation. You can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn or head to netta@aerodye.com or aerodye.com. But thank you so much.
And make sure to buy your book.
Yes, The Inclusive Organization. You can purchase that on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Walmart, or even Target. So it's everywhere right now.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone watching. That brings us to the end of today's Creator Conversations. I hope our chat got you thinking about nepotism in an entirely new way. If you're thinking about becoming a creator, on the other hand, that might be hard to get nepotism to help you there, but you can go ahead and follow the LinkedIn for Creators showcase page. You'll find tons of resources, inspiration, helpful tips, and of course, make sure to follow our guests, Melody Wilding and Etta Jenkins, for all their latest content and insights. And be sure to join us for the next episode of Creator Conversations, where we'll no doubt keep exploring pressing issues and trends that shape the world of work. Until then, I'm Scott Rising, and take care.